It's Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, Channel 95. We're back for one more show of the neighborhood news. Remember, if you are watching this show and it's not a Tuesday, it's because you're watching a repeat show. So please come back next Tuesday at 7 o'clock here on this channel, and we will have a brand new show for you. Fala Portuguese Community, sejam bem-vindos para mais programa de notícias da sua vizinhança. Hoje nós estamos de volta com mais programa. Não se esqueça, se está a escutar-nos, a ver-nos e não é terça-feira, é porque está a haver programa que está a ser repetido. Portanto, venha terça-feira e nós temos programa novo para si. Hoje temos convidado do departamento de escolar aqui da cidade de Fall River e vamos conversar pouco com ele. And we're back today, and today we have a special guest. But before we go to our guest, she comes in here to make me company.
Absolutely. I don't want you to ride this alone, Carlos.
And I'm glad that she's able to come here every week and do the show with me. And probably she has. Most times we agreed. Sometimes we do not agreed, and some of them is we already showed the charter. We're going to have the charter review questions that it's out there.
Some of them we disagreed.
We disagreed with, and we're going to have to one day to bring the application here, and we're going to vote live.
We're going to fill it out. Yeah, absolutely. Fill it out together,
and
right?
why we are disagreeing.
For a minute, I thought you were going to talk about charter schools.
No, the charter review. And with us today, we have Dr. Costar, and it's always a pleasure to have you here. I think it's the second time that you come.
I've been here many times, but I think it's the first time I've been on your show.
On my show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because I remember talking to you here in the studio before, but I didn't. I come to.
Might have been with CJ and Chips.
Exactly. So I come in here way too many times, and in the very future, I'm putting a new show together for the Portuguese community, which is going to be done in Portuguese. Channel 95 approached me. BCC approached me with the idea that they don't have a Portuguese show.
That's great.
And I will probably be the perfect person to do it, because
absolutely.
I have my regular Portuguese and English.
Followers,
and maybe we can do even a translation.
Yep. My Portuguese is not good enough to be able to speak, but I usually can understand everything.
I'm not even gonna find how you end up with the Portuguese name, but that's okay. That alone.
No, it's how I ended up with an R at the end of my Portuguese name.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
The interesting thing was I did Frank Baptista's show one time.
Yes.
And he was translating questions, and he would ask the questions to me in Portuguese for the audience and then translated them into English. But he would ask the questions in Portuguese, and I would answer them in English because I could understand them. I just couldn't communicate well enough.
Perfect.
So, you are one of the brand new benches of the or branches to the school committee, and you got there and you pretty much found out a bag with everything mixed inside, and you guys now needs to put everything on the right places and file everything. So it is a mess in there. So you already had a couple of meetings with the school committee?
Actually, I've had one meeting. My first meeting was in January.
And a couple of
We've had a couple of subcommittee meetings.
Subcommittees. Yeah. And how you getting your feet wet already?
Well, I'm new, but I'm not new. I worked in the school system for 31 years, so I know the schools pretty well. I've been in just about every school. The problem for me is getting updated, because it's been about 7 or 8 years since I worked in the schools. Wow. And during those 7 or 8 years, there have been a lot of changes. Mm-hmm. So what I've really been doing ever since the election, actually ever since the inauguration, is that I've been visiting schools and talking to principals, and I've been through about half of them. I spend about an hour with each principal, and then we usually go on a tour of the school and we walk around. I usually find when I walk around that there are people there that know me or that I know. In my past life, when I worked in the school system, one of my jobs was that if someone had a concern or a complaint, they would call a superintendent. Superintendent would call me. My job was to go kind of like solve the problem.
Right.
So I would, very frequently, I would be in schools, working in classrooms with teachers, students, parents, and principals. So the principals are relatively new, but a lot of the teachers still are there that knew me and remembered me. So I've had a very warm greeting. I get to see some good things. I get to see some things that I make mental notes that, need some work, need to be changed, I think. And I'm going to put that all into my head and mix it together and try to do what I can to try to make things better for the Fall River Public Schools.
That's great.
And we're going to start from the beginning.
Okay.
And Bernadette still has kids on school ages, so if she has any question for you, my last one, is attending probably the last year of high school and going to move on. But
I have a grandchild at Morton,
Oh, great.
right, and another one that's at Holy Name. So, and I have 3 grandchildren that all at one time or other did go to public schools, but now I have one at Morton, 7th grader.
My kids attended public school, not because I cannot have them there. It was because I could not afford to take them out of there. That's why they attended. We had a lot of issues during the kids in school, not because they were bad kids or because they were good students. It was always because they got pushed back because they were not the bad kids.
Right.
And I had many problems. One time I had to change my girls only after 6 months they've been on that school. I had to bring them back to the old school. Thank God at the time was Mr. Aguiar. He was in charge of the school.
Absolutely.
And he was welcome my kids back again because he realized that they are good students, they're good kids.
That was the Stone School back then?
No, it was the Laterno.
Oh, the Laterno, yeah, the old Laterno, that's right.
The old
Yeah.
Laterno
Sure,
school.
yeah.
Let's start from the beginning
Sure.
with the net school spending. That is the city, the state told the city how much to spend. How they based that number on?
Well, my understanding it's based on something called a foundation budget, is that they look at every city or town, they look at the number of pupils you have in the town, and then there's a formula that they plug in based on the number of pupils you have, but also the number of pupils you have in different categories. So a city would get more money in the formula if you had so many special needs children, or English language learners would be another category, vocational students would be another category, regular students. What we used to call free and reduced lunch, or disadvantaged students, that you'd get a higher money toward the foundation budget, and that money, that makes up the budget, and then the net school spending is the amount that a city is required to give in direct cost to the schools. And I have to say that when I worked in the school system, and in my last job, I was executive assistant to the superintendent, Dr. Fisher, and there was no such thing as net school spending. The mayors basically would say, we're going to give you this, and this is what you've got to work with. Oh, wow. And I remember a couple of times, one year where where Dr. Fisher came in and he was asking for more money for the schools. I remember it was during an Olympic year, and he called it the gold medal budget, and the mayor was offering the bronze medal budget, and he was asking for more, and the mayor was saying, well, this is what I can afford, and it wasn't any such thing as net school spending. And in those days, Fall River schools would have its good years and its bad years, and when the city was doing well, the schools did well, and when the city was not doing well, the schools suffered as a result. And I can remember clearly, as part of his team, and Meg Mail Brown was part of that team too, we sat at a table, there were 7 or 8 of us going over the budget, page by page, school by school, line item by line item, trying to cut things to get down to the amount of money that the mayor said he could afford to give to the schools. And that was a very arduous, difficult process. Net school spending has changed all of that. It's something that I'm learning about.
Right.
And I mean, for one part helped, but for the other parts,
Right.
didn't help, because our city budget is 240 million, and the school budget takes 124 million. So it's cut it right.
80% of which is reimbursed by the state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it cut us right, right in half. So they can come around and always increase that net school spending
Well,
without us having nothing to do or
the state is in control of that.
The state.
The state is in control of that. We in the school committee I think, are in control of the budget, and to make sure that the money is spent wisely. I think that that's a concern that a lot of people have. I know when I was running for office, it was a concern of mine that, okay, so we're getting this money, more than we used to get.
Right.
Are we spending it wisely? Are we putting it in the right places? Are we spending it equitably? These are the things that I'm paying as close attention to for me, especially next year when the superintendent has already talked about the whole idea that it's going to be a difficult budget year for us next year, that we may be getting the budget from the President Governor Baker. He's offering less of an increase in Chapter 78 than we've had before. Wow. And to have level services, we would need more money than we're getting. And that would mean that just to have everything the way it is now, there would have to be cuts. And that's what we're looking at.
I see, the way I see that they run that budget is the school departments makes their budgets based on the money they're going to collect from from the city. When they accommodate, I mean, if we can add another $1 million here on this department, we have all that money to spend, okay? So, and that's really what I'm going to look for the new committee to look for.
Except that the budget process comes out before that. I mean, the budget process starts now. In my memory, there'll be public hearings in April. They'll be putting the budget together, or it's already being put together now, and they're doing the preliminary work on that, and that has to come first. You just want to make sure that it's being spent wisely, and that we can, you see, there are certain obligations contractually that make it very, very difficult to have a level services budget based on the amount of money that we're projected to get. And by the way, that's not finalized until the legislature actually approves a budget. The governor can make a recommendation, but the legislature can make a final determination. They can raise it, they can lower it.
Right.
Be open to lower it. But we just need to look at, if you look at, I know what I was saying, contractual obligations like contractual teacher raises, or just teacher step raises that are normally in there, that you go from the 4th step to the 5th step to the 6th step. If you look at that, that amount alone exceeds the amount of increase that Governor Baker's budget is having. So, and then you have increases and just normal increases in things that occur. So it's going to be a challenging year to be on a school committee.
Yeah, I'd say.
Is the budget available to public?
Well, yeah, we have public hearings. My concern, is it
the budget.
The present budget, or the budget that they're working on now?
No, the budget that you're working on.
I haven't seen the budget that we're working on, but it'll be presented. And it'll be presented, and it'll be given, there'll be public input and public hearings where the budget must be made available. The only concern I have about that is that the budget that I used to see, the way it used to be presented, and the way that I'm seeing it presented now, just looks different to me. The budget that I had was 3 inches thick. It was school by school, department by department. I remember the agonizing process of it. But the budget that I see, the budget reports that the school committee gets, and I've only seen a couple. I went to one meeting in January, and I went to a finance meeting recently. Even though I'm not on the finance team, I'm on a learning curve. And you get kind of a summary of where we are budget, and there's budget line items, but to me it's a skeleton. I would hope that when we get the budget as a school committee, there'll be much more. I know that I'll be asking for more than that. I haven't seen the previous budget, but I need to have, like, I want to see a school by school breakdown. I want to see a department by department breakdown. I want to see union contracts versus non-union contracts. There are a number of things I want to look at. I want to see job descriptions. What do people do?
Right.
There are new jobs that exist that didn't exist 7 years ago. I'm finding them out as I go from school to school. And one of my questions I always ask is, so what do you do?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that I need to learn because for me, I'm not somebody who inherently wants to cut budgets, but I know that the sanctity of the classroom, direct services to kids is number one on my list. I mean, for me, empowering teachers and empowering parents are the two most important things that I stand for. And I want to make sure that services to kids and services to teachers who service those kids directly comes before anything else. But before I do that, I have to learn, literally, how many positions have changed since
Right.
2007, which is when I retired.
I mean, what I've been hearing lately is if we don't give the school department this money, it's because we're cutting the education from the kids. I don't think that the $1 million that we still need to pay back, it's going to cut the education of the kids. The kids not going to get, more education because they're going to get an extra $1 million.
Carlos, one of the things since the day, it wasn't even the day I was inaugurated. From the day that I was elected, I had to hear on radio and media reports how the, quote, new people, unquote, were against education. First, we were against education because we weren't fighting to keep the superintendent here.
Right.
That was the first reason we were against education.
Right.
Then we were against education because of all of this data, which I said all along was data that you could look at in various different ways, and I
Right.
stand by that. Depending on how you present the data, you can present it in such a way to make things look like this is half full,
Right.
or you can present the data in such a way to make it look half empty, and
Correct.
both can be true. That's all I said.
Yeah.
But then there were actually people that were telling teachers that I was against education because I was putting that down. The fortunate thing is that the people who worked with me for 30 years know that I'm not against education. I mean,
Right.
I've been fighting for education my whole life, and I will continue to do that.
Yeah, but that's another thing. And then they have, the whole Mayo-Brown process.
Right. Well, that's another big job.
That's another
right now.
big. It's another big thing that I cannot believe that Fall River is kicking this nice superintendent, and the school. She changed the school around. The school department, she changed the education around. Nothing of that, I was never proved that. They say numbers, show me the numbers.
You want me to tell you some numbers? Okay, this is what I fought during the election, and I had some articles in the newspaper to try to resolve what I was trying to say, and then I had people on the school department basically trying to refute what I was saying, and people refuting what I was saying made my point. I basically said that it was complicated, that you can present things in a variety of ways depending on what data you wanted to look at, and then there was an article saying that I basically was anti-children and anti-students, and it wasn't confusing, it was very clear, and the more you read the article, most of my friends said they couldn't get past the second paragraph of the article, it was so confusing.
Confusing, right.
But it comes down to two metrics. There was the metric that looks at how many level 1, we are a level 4 district. Now we're a level 4 district because we have one level 4 school. Now in 2014 we had 5 level 1 schools, and we say that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
We have 5 level 1 schools, and it is wonderful. They've shown improvement. That's one set of data. At the same time, there's another kind of data that I look at. It was called percentile data. Percentile data is this. If I'm in the 20th percentile, that means that 80% of the schools in the state do better than I do. Now that's not comparing me to Brockton and New Bedford and the gateway cities. That's comparing me to everybody, and some people would argue that's not fair. I would say that since I teach at UMass Dartmouth and I have kids in my class from Fall River, and they're sitting right next to kids from Newton and Wellesley and Weston, and they have to compete with them, so that's not an argument for me.
Right.
I looked at the percentile data. So here is the little secret they didn't want to tell you. So last year, based on 2014 accountability data, we had 5 level 1 schools. The top 3 hovered around the 50th percentile. So our level 1 schools that they said were so wonderful, and you know what, they are. There's some great learning going on there, and those schools improved. There's no doubt about it. and I give them credit for that. But that meant that they were as good as 50% of the schools of similar size around the state. But actually, that's pretty good for Fall River, I think. I don't. They came up in order to do that.
Right.
But we also had 2 level 1 schools, one of which was in the 26th percentile, and another which was in the 37th percentile. So a level 1 school that 74% of the other schools in the state score higher than, but it's a level 1 school.
Right.
That confused me.
Yeah, that
And here's what
almost doesn't make sense.
But yet we talked about how wonderful that was.
Right.
Well, the reason for that is that the state, in its infinite wisdom, and I think that the state has become so powerful that they have a lot to do with selling things the way they want to sell them.
Gotcha.
The state has decided to give out these metrics, and the metric that they choose to give out is school improvement data. So how do you get to be a level 1 school? You get to be a level 1 school by being a school that's really low percentile-wise, and then you increase. So a school that was like 5th percentile goes up to 26th percentile.
They're a level
They've
1.
made a lot of growth.
Right.
They're level 1.
Right.
And we talk about them being level 1. But here's what I said during the campaign that people didn't understand when I tried to say how you can say anything you want with statistics.
Right.
In Somerset, level 3 schools were at the 50th percentile.
Oh, geez.
And their level 1 schools were at the 63rd or 65th percentile. You could be a level 2 school and mean the 62nd percentile. So I said, okay, so here's what it comes down to. If you take our level 1 school that was at the 36th percentile and you could magically lift it up and put it across the river and drop it in Somerset, that same school with the same
Right.
kids and same everything
Right.
would be in the would be like level 3.
Yeah.
So all I was saying was, we made improvement. It's a wonderful thing. Teachers worked very hard to do that, but the data is presented in such a way, and the state encourages that to make it look better than it is.
Right.
Now, in the final, to finally prove my point, and I almost found this kind of humorous because it was lost in everything, is after the election was over, and I hadn't been inaugurated yet, the 2015 data came in. So guess what happened? We went from 5 level 1 schools to 3 level 1 schools. 2 of them dropped, okay? So you would think, since the school department had been saying how great they were because we had 5 level 1 schools, they would say, oh, we're not doing too well because we now went from 3 down to 2. But
Right.
no, they didn't say that. You know what they said? Our schools all went up in percentile. And you know what? They
It's
did.
and it's
They
the way
did.
that they
They used the same metric that I was criticized for using during the campaign to make a point to make them look good.
Right.
Then,
Right.
and you know what I say to them? That was correct. I agree with that. In fact, one of the schools that went down from a level 1 to a level 2 went from the 53rd percentile to the 57th percentile. They went up. But they went down. So, I mean, the point is that the data can be made to look any way you want. And if you wanted to make anybody look good,
Yeah.
you could point out whichever piece of data you wanted.
Yeah. Of course.
That was the point I was trying to make.
It's all in the way you explain it as well.
And I was like the devil for doing that somehow.
No, but the truth is, and nobody, I don't believe on those numbers. I'm glad that McMill runs, moving on, is going to a different school departments. I'm just hoping that 5 years down the road, that community is not going to be suffering the way we are suffering, because I really don't think that she did a good job. I don't think she deserved that pay that she's getting. But you know, time will tell, because she's going into a community that they are very nice. Okay, the school runs very good. She's not going to have problems asking for more money because they have the money to give it to her. Okay, but time will tell. What I'm looking for in Fall River for the next school budget is for savings, because I don't care how much is we supposed to give to the school department. I want the school department to get their budget not based on that number, but based on their numbers. And if we are if we are $1,000 away from that goal, those $1,000 will come back to the city in free cash at the end of the fiscal year.
But back in 2007, when a school system ran a surplus and there was free cash in the school department at the end of the year, that money was turned over to the city. The city could use it however it needed. It could go in their rainy day fund. It could be used however they wanted to. We turned over a lot of surpluses to the city. Guess what? Now that doesn't happen. Because if you turn that surplus over to the city, guess what happens? That money gets added toward your net school spending for the next year. The city has to give that money back to the school department anyway. I mean, when it comes right down to it, and this is maybe radical for me to say, but I said it during the campaign, so I'm not going to shy away from it. Net school spending law has been a great equalizer for communities like ours, and I think it's a wonderful law. I don't think we should have been at the mercy where a mayor could say, this is what you're going to get, and that's all you're going to get, live with it. I've seen too much pain caused from that, and I've worked for a lot of superintendents and a lot of mayors. And I understand, too, that they have their hands tied and they have their problems, and I'm a citizen of Fall River as well as being on the school committee. But net school spending, as good a law as it is and how helpful it's been, at what point does it strangle a city? And at what point does that law need to be looked at? I'm not talking about by our mayor or by our school committee. I'm talking about our legislature. I think people are afraid to look at that. But I mean, there are times where, as a citizen, you'd sit back and you say to yourself, there's something wrong, okay? Like, I went to a meeting one time around the time when they were going to be giving pink slips out to policemen and firemen.
Oh boy.
Okay?
2008.
And at the same time that they were giving out, and it was like June, if I remember correctly, they were giving, this was last year, and they were giving out, or talking about giving out pink slips to policemen and firemen. And at the June school committee meeting, they hired an in-school suspension teacher. And at the time, I have no doubt that they needed that in-school suspension teacher. But I also sat back and I said to myself, you know, if I'm on the school committee, I have to look out for the school side.
Yeah.
But if I'm a mayor or if I'm a citizen, if you were to put it to a vote, what would you need? An in-school suspension teacher, a policeman, or a fireman?
Right.
I mean, those are the really difficult decisions that net school spending makes it a moot point. You can't touch it.
Yeah.
And maybe there needs to be some way to tweak the law, not in a dramatic way, because I would not want to hurt a city like Fall River, or we need that money. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way so that if a city's on the verge of bankruptcy, there has to be like almost a circuit breaker that kicks in that says that something even like that any surplus could go back to the city. We used to do, that's what we used to do.
Right.
Now we can't do that now, but maybe it's something that should be considered.
Yeah. The transportation is done by the school committee too?
Yeah, the school, that's a big part of our budget, transportation issues.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Because
And I've
that's
been
something
looking at
that we
that.
need to talk about and spend more time.
Yep.
Because I think we running a limo business,
Sure are.
not a school transportation. But
It's a big issue.
that's enough. Another half an hour for next show. Dr. Costar, thank you for coming
Thank you.
again.
Thank
And
you for allowing me.
Thank you.
Bernadette, see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a good night.